Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for being here. It's my pleasure to talk to you this morning about scientific integrity. My name is Francesca Griffo, and I'm the Scientific Integrity Official at the Environmental Protection Agency. I like to start with this slide because it reminds me of one of the big reasons why we worry about scientific integrity. This is a quote from William Ruckelshaus, who came back to the agency for a second term as its administrator. And he talked about how folks at the agency should conduct themselves with the openness and integrity which alone can ensure public trust in the agency. Public trust is a key piece of scientific integrity. It's a key piece of why we care about it. And it's the reason you're looking at a fishbowl is because it was called the Fishbowl Memo. So just in case you were wondering why there's a goldfish. But another part of the agency's history on scientific integrity were the principles of scientific integrity that were created by the National Partnership Council in 1999. Again, most of this content has been subsumed into the scientific integrity policy, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these. But the current policy that we have has its origins in President Obama's inaugural address in 2009, where he pledged to restore science to its rightful place. This was followed up very quickly a few months later with a Scientific Integrity Memorandum. This memorandum gave the Office of Science and Technology Policy 120 days to create guidance for the agencies. They did create that guidance, and the agencies then each created their own scientific integrity policies. EPA was right out there at the front. I think we were the second agency actually to come up with a draft policy right after the Department of the Interior. That was in August of 2011. We had a very strong, robust comment period with many, many public comments coming in and released a much strengthened policy in February of 2012. So I think I'd like to start by just helping you to understand what is scientific integrity. So we think of it as adherence to professional values and practices. That part of it is probably quite familiar to you. But the part that may not be as familiar is actually that it's not just about conducting the science. It's about conducting, communicating, and applying the results of that science, as well as supervising that science. So it's a broader definition than we might be familiar with. Obviously, our goal in all of this is objectivity, clarity, reproducibility, and utility. That's what we want from our science. But we also want something that's going to provide some insulation for us from bias, fabrication, falsification, plagiarism, outside interference, and censorship. One of the important things at EPA is we also have a scientific misconduct policy. That policy is adjudicated or carried out by the Office of the Inspector General, and that's what deals with with fabrication and falsification. The plagiarism part has been recently passed to the Scientific Integrity Group, so we're dealing with that. So what's the challenge? What is it that we're trying to address here? What is it that we're trying to prevent? What we're trying to prevent is the manipulation, suppression, or the delay of science or scientific reports, other scientific products. We want to have transparency around agency decision-making, right? We don't want a lack of transparency. We want to eliminate partiality or conflict of interest in peer review or advisory committees. And we want to get rid of a culture that's unwelcoming to dissenting opinions. Very important to us that we can have those robust conversations about the science that actually get us to the quality, rigorous, independent science that we want in the end. We don't want agency end users directing research and results either. So those are the big challenges that we face. The policy, though, is very broad, and I think this is one of its strengths. It does not just apply to employees at the agency. It applies to contractors, grantees, volunteers, and collaborators, so a very broad group. And again, just to emphasize, not just those who conduct that science, but those who supervise, manage, influence those scientific activities, those who communicate that information in an official capacity, and those who utilize that information in making agency policy or management decisions. So it's very broad. Just to look at this graphically, this is sort of the typical stuff in the green boxes that we think of when we think of the conduct of science. We're very lucky at EPA. We have a very strong QC and strong peer review, but that's the process that you're familiar with. And this is really what we think of as research integrity in the most formal sense. But we also supervise that science. We communicate that science. And we utilize that science in decision making. And these are the pieces that we've added on, and together we have our scientific integrity. So scientific integrity is not just the conduct, it's all these other pieces as well. Another way of looking at this and understanding what we mean by scientific integrity is to look at what it is that we do that makes sure that the science is great. We have our scientific methods validated. We spend a lot of time and energy on this. We work hard to have very qualified scientists. We have very strong accreditation of our labs and facilities all across the agency, in the regions and throughout. And we have a very strong information quality and quality assurance program. These are all the things that we're doing to make sure that the science is great. In addition, we ensure that we use peer review in our federal advisory committees appropriately. We make sure that we don't have conflicts of interest. We make sure that we have a free flow of science, and that we have management review that's based on scientific quality. And of course, the timely release of our products. We don't want to sit on them forever. The result is an open culture of science, an open scientific culture, honest investigation, a firm commitment to evidence, and a culture of robust scientific inquiry and discussion. All very important pieces of our scientific picture. And in the end, what we hope is that what this all leads to, going back again to public trust in agency science, transparent scientific processes and open communication of science, and most importantly, perhaps, scientific conclusions that are not influenced by their policy implications. They're independent. And scientists, of course, able to do their best work. Again, we keep coming back to the importance of our scientists. Another, key piece of why the policy works is that we have a scientific integrity committee. It's made up of deputy scientific integrity officials representing each of the agency's program offices and regions. It's important for you to know who your scientific integrity official is, and I'll give you a website at the end where you can look up who is your deputy scientific integrity official. Now, the policy itself has 4 sections. It's 14 pages long. I'm not going to go in, obviously, to all those 14 pages. You can read it. It's easy to find on the website. But these are the 4 sections that it talks about. So what I am going to do is I've picked just a few highlights, a few pieces that are very important of the policy to tell you a few things about. The first one is the right of last review. What this means is that as scientists, you have the right to review the science. So if you work on a project and that project then gets translated for a different audience, you have the right to go back and look and make sure that that science has been translated correctly. Do you get to review the policy? No. Do you get to review what people say that science is, what they're going to do with that science? No. But you do get to go back and actually review the scientific content. And again, nothing nefarious has to happen for this to go wrong. The most well-intentioned people can take very complex scientific concepts, translate them for a different audience, and lose some of the nuances of that science. Another important piece of the policy is it gives you your personal views exception. What this means is you can take your government hat off and speak as a private citizen. This is very important because you still have to pay attention to the ethics rules at the agency, right? You have to be pragmatic in the use of this right, and it does not protect you from the consequences of speaking out. So I try to say to people, what is your goal? What is it that you're trying to achieve, and what is the most effective way to get to that goal? It may or may not be by using this personal views exception, but do be aware of your ethics questions, such as, are you being compensated? Is it political? Is it lobbying? Is it electioneering? Is it public data? Is it agency data? So it's fairly complex, but it is in there, and it's important that you know that. Another key strength of the policy is that it very explicitly states that all EPA employees are prohibited from suppressing, altering, or otherwise impeding the timely release of scientific findings, and we'll talk more about this. It also encourages the professional development of scientists. What do we mean by professional development? We mean publishing, holding office in professional societies, editing journals, accruing professional awards, getting the training that you need. But again, this is one that's complicated. And because it's complicated, we've actually created in Skillport a module that talks about the ethics of professional development. But today, we're here to do a training. The training that we're doing today has 5 objectives. I want you to know the definition of scientific integrity. I want you to know where to find information about scientific integrity. I want you to understand how scientific integrity enhances the work you do. It's not just another box to check. It's something that's very key to the success of our work at the agency. I want you to understand what constitutes an allegation of a lapse in scientific integrity. In other words, where is it that we go off the track and things go wrong? And I want you to know how and where to report an allegation of a problem with scientific integrity. So those are the training objectives. For more information about scientific integrity at EPA, you can go to our website. It has an enormous amount of information. Now I'd like to turn to the video.
The responsibility for making sure our science has integrity belongs to all of us. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency has many policies and practices to ensure it uses robust and independent science in all its decision-making. It is the responsibility of every EPA employee, contractor, grantee, volunteer, and collaborator to conduct, utilize, communicate, and supervise science with honesty, integrity, and transparency, both inside and outside the agency. The EPA Scientific Integrity Policy prohibits anyone from suppressing, delaying, or altering scientific findings. Enabling the free flow of scientific information, attention to quality control, consistent and appropriate use of peer review, and professional development for agency scientists are some of the tools EPA uses to accomplish this. Scientific integrity means we adhere to professional values and practices, ensure objectivity, clarity, reproducibility, and utility of our science, and provide insulation from bias, fabrication, falsification, plagiarism, outside interference, and censorship. We must speak up if we see suppression or barriers to the timely release of scientific findings. If we see or experience intimidation or coercion to alter scientific data, findings, or professional opinions, we must speak up. If anyone reports interference in the integrity of science, you must listen openly, judge fairly, and act accordingly. Allegations of a loss of scientific integrity may be reported to a variety of officials. Some good places to start are the Deputy Scientific Integrity Officials, the Scientific Integrity Official, and the Office of Inspector General. Together, we can ensure EPA's work is transparent and based on robust science, and that communication of EPA science is accurate and timely. For this alone can ensure public trust. The Scientific Integrity Policy enhances EPA's ability to carry out its mission to effectively protect human health and the environment.
Okay, who's responsible for scientific integrity at EPA?
All of us.
Exactly, all of us, right? And what is scientific integrity?
Adherence to professional practices.
Exactly, when we're doing all those things, right? Conducting, supervising, communicating, and utilizing science. Terrific. What are your questions? Yes?
Where is the line between science and policy?
Good question. Okay, the line between science and policy, I think, is a hard one sometimes for scientists to understand and actually draw. Part of that is because when we typically publish, we have the sections of a scientific paper, the introduction, and so on and so forth, and we merge those things frequently in those sections. So it's very hard to make that distinguish. But here's what I tell people. When you are in the research and the research results, those sections, you're very firmly in the science realm. When you start to talk about what that science means, you're kind of creeping towards the policy realm. And when you really talk about what are we going to do with that science, what is it used for, then you are squarely in the policy realm. So it really is going to be an individual answer to that question. But those are the guidelines. Other questions? Yes?
What do you mean by delay of science?
Yeah, another good question. Delay can mean a lot of things. What we'd like to think about is that if a product is finished on June 20th, does that mean we have to release it on June 21st? No, of course not. We can have a strategic window. There are lots of other factors going on at the agency, and that's what we think about when we think about rolling out a product or releasing research, is what's going to be the best context for it. Now, is that best context going to be a year or 2 years? No, right? It shouldn't be that long. A month, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, probably that's not a delay in science. So again, there's not an easy exact answer to that question. There's going to be a range. But I think if something's sitting on a shelf for over a year, you can be pretty sure that you should be talking to the scientific integrity official. Other questions? Yes.
What if I disagree with the science underpinning a policy decision?
Yeah, that's a hard one too. Basically, the scientific integrity policy talks about how you can have a differing scientific opinion. And what that means is if you have concerns about that, you can put your differing scientific opinion in writing, and that opinion will travel with the rest of the scientific conclusions all the way through the various decision makers. It may also find itself as part of the charge to a peer review and be resolved at one level or another. Now, that being said, the policy, we will be putting out a more specific differing scientific opinions policy that will help to walk people through that. But yeah, it's very important. I mean, if we have those kinds of concerns, we should have a way of expressing them. One more, yes.
Well, can I talk about EPA-related issues as a private citizen?
You can, and you should. In fact, I really encourage people to be out and about talking about the work that we do here, because I think we do amazing work. But again, there are constraints on that. When we came to work for the agency, we took an oath, and no matter what we're doing, whether it's a personal activity outside of work or an activity within work, we have to be thinking about, the ethical constraints that are on the things that we can talk about. But yes, you can talk about those things. You have to be, again, I would think about the ethics rules and perhaps even consult, if you can anticipate it ahead of time, with an ethics official. Another key point there is it's very hard to stand up and say, I'm not representing EPA when you're at a scientific society meeting, for example, and you have a badge on that says your name and EPA. It's very hard to stand up and speak as not EPA, for example, when you're on the agenda for a community meeting as being from EPA. So you have to kind of think about it broadly in those terms. But no, we are not muzzled as scientists. Terrific. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope that this information really helps you to further enhance the culture of scientific integrity at EPA. Thanks again.